This episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan is dedicated to the memory of Pat Patterson. It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now here he is, the man who uses his hands to shop at Bulk Barn, Bill Chase. Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer, and welcome to another edition of Diary of a Wrestling Fan. I am Bill Chase, a podcast that chronicles my 33 amazing years of being a fan of professional wrestling. Thank you for listening on Spotify, on Anchor, wherever podcasts are streamed. And wherever you're listening from, hit subscribe, hit follow, do whatever you gotta do. And if you're listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, that notifications bell, and hit that like button right now. Well, folks, it's going to be a great episode. December to Dismember. Wow, I can't even say it without chuckling a bit. 2006. Oh, my goodness. Part of being a wrestling fan, ladies and gentlemen, is sometimes you just got to go through the stuff that wasn't so great, but still memorable nonetheless, even if it is not for all the right reasons. But anyway, that don't matter. But before we get to that, of course, I have to give a quick plug to Pro Wrestling Ontario. By the time this podcast goes to air, there will be a new YouTube video on our channel at Pro Wrestling Ontario, an episode of Foundation, where you will see the Wanderer, Wade Allen, after several weeks of calling the internet champion JT Kirk out. They're finally going to square off. The internet title is on the line. You do not want to miss this. Again, it is on our YouTube channel. If you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, just scroll to the right side of the video, hit that link once you're done the podcast, and go on and watch this new episode of Foundation. Also, lots of other great content to check out. We got more episodes of Foundation. We have complete shows, both Iron Cup tournaments, more matches, more promos, you name it. Check it out. It's on Pro Wrestling Ontario. Follow us on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook. All right, we're going to be off and running here with December to December 2006. Sorry, I'm late with the podcast this week, folks. I really don't have the best excuses. It's just I was just not in the greatest of moods recently. I've been in the greatest of moods this past week, to be honest with y'all. And yeah, I don't know. It's rough. You know what I mean? It's COVID whole thing. I'm not here to give opinions on that sort of stuff. I'm just here to present a good wrestling podcast that, makes us proud to be fans. But at the same time, though, I think everyone in the world is stressing over this, to say the least, at some point. And it's hard. It's hard. I'm not saying I'm affected by COVID itself physically, because I, thank God, never contracted it thus far. And I'm thankful for that. Sadly, I do sympathize with people who have caught it. So there's that. But yes, I want to get back to doing what I love, and this is one of those things. All right, so we're off and running here. This is December to Dismember ECW, or should I say WWECW, December to Dismember 2006. What a shit show this was. Oh my goodness. You want to talk about shows that didn't do that well but were historically significant? This is it for sure. Now, to give people some sort of context here, obviously we have to go back to the relaunch. Quick, little recap of what led to the relaunch of ECW and the ECW name in the first place. Now, in 2005, in June of 2005, there was the highly successful ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, an ECW reunion show that did really well. Had a lot of fanfare. Was a great night of nostalgia. It was really good. So successful, as a matter of fact, that they decided to bring it back in 2006, leading to a tremendous moment of RVD defeating John Cena to become the WWE champion. And wow, what a moment that was! Again, so they caught lightning in a bottle twice, to say the least. Me personally, in terms of nostalgia, I thought the 05 show was better, but in terms of overall quality, I thought the 06 show was better. I don't know. But either way, both shows were very memorable for all the best reasons. And this show was leading into ECW becoming its own brand, which has been hyped for several weeks at this point. And the hype was off to a good start. Joey Styles, who had taken over for Jim Ross on commentary due to the company's ongoing ridiculousness of trying to humiliate and get rid of JR. Joey Styles is brought in to replace him. Now, I don't think JR needed to be replaced in the first place. But if you're going to replace him with someone, Joey Styles is a great choice. I've always liked Joey. I've always liked his works, to say the least. I always liked the way he did commentary. And even working with Lawler, him and Lawler were not bad together. That's just it. Him and Lawler were actually pretty decent together. Not iconic like JR and Lawler are, but still, it worked. Something was there. But, it's not like they were, the best duo ever, even far from it. But still, something was there. Joey, I thought, was adjusting well to the WWE product. But obviously, apparently the rumor started that people didn't like Joey's, style of commentary, and they felt that he wasn't telling stories as good as JR did. Well, to be fair, nobody tells stories as good as JR did. I'm sorry, JR is the best at telling stories in that way, in terms of getting an angle or a certain segment or even a match over and what it's trying to accomplish. JR is a master of that. You can't duplicate the best. I'm sorry. Joey, however, on the other hand, was one of the best of his time. And I had no problems with his commentary. I thought there was nothing lost in translation in terms of getting a story over. But either way, I'm a bit off track here. So Joey did a nice shoot promo on Lawler on the WWF and quitting, addressing those rumors about him not being appreciated for his commentary, but being taken off WrestleMania in favor of JR. And it worked. It helped set the tone for ECW, because it was shoot style promos that way are very ECW. And they weren't shoot to be shoots. They were trying to get something across. So they brought in some old ECW talents, such as Sabu, the Sandman, and a few others. But those two are the ones that first pop into mind. But of course, you can't have ECW without RVD. RVD was still riding high at this point. He was Mr. Money in the Bank. Despite stop and start main event pushes over the years, constant people bickering online. A lot of smart fans didn't like the way he was being used. I personally didn't like the way he was being used either in a lot of ways. But still, it's not as if he was never outright buried, I thought. I mean, some could argue Triple H did. I don't think Triple H buried him. I just think he kind of killed his momentum as a main event guy for a while. But at the same time, whether we want to believe it or not, Triple H wasn't the booker back then. So either way, that's how it was. And still, though, he had star power. He was still massively over with fans, not just the ECW fan base, but fans still loved RVD. He cut that memorable shoot promo at the 05 One Night Stand because he was injured, couldn't compete, and that was largely his idea of these ECW reunion shows. And RVD has even said publicly in shoot interviews that Vince McMahon always doubted the true power ECW had in a lot of ways. And the one infamous conversation comes to mind when RVD mentions how, the fans chant ECW, and Vince says to him, they chant it because that's how I want it to be. Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing here. But still, part of it's true. That might be an unpopular opinion. Part of it is true. Because there were fans in several arenas all across North America chanting ECW. But judging by ECW's attendance numbers, I'm sorry, there weren't that many people attending their shows. Not to say ECW didn't do well. They did. They had their fan base. They were doing really well even when they went under. Well, so it seemed, in terms of audience and whatnot. But I guess Vince just thought he could milk it for something because he thought it belonged to him now. Some say Vince created ECW just to give it one more shovel. I don't know about that. I think that's kind of a ridiculous notion. But at the same time, though, reading things in JR's book recently, I'm not shocked. JR even alludes to the fact that Vince isn't really booking for fans anymore and stopped booking for fans a long time ago. Somebody can even trace it back to the day WCW went away. It's possible. Fans are always going to tune in. You're always going to make money. Even without fans now, they're still making some money. So, I don't know. It could be true, and JR was there, so he'd have a better viewpoint than any of us would. But anyway, I digress. So the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, of course, like I said, ended with RVD defeating John Cena. All the ECW roster coming into the ring to celebrate with him. And ECW was also going to be created as a brand to help get new talent over. And to me, this was really that was a good idea because Raw and SmackDown, despite a large plethora of content with a lot of stars, the brand split was still happening at this point. I really felt that, again, it's good for a third brand to just establish some new talent, some unknowns that are not known to mainstream fans, because ECW did that back in the day. They brought in guys like Chris Jericho who weren't known to audiences. They brought in guys like Eddie Guerrero was only known to a certain small audience around the time he came into ECW. He was known with the AAA fans with his run with Hart Bar, but he wasn't known that way. Benoit, like a lot of those guys were not known. I'm not saying ECW made them known nationally, but I'm just saying they gave them a part of American exposure in the U.S. that they never had before. That's not to say Jericho had Smoky Mountain, but that didn't last too long. So anyway, but I'm all over the place here. I'm sorry, but the point is that ECW itself, and with Heyman, now Paul Heyman was going to be the head, I guess, producer of the brand. Again, Heyman is the original visionary behind the success of ECW. Heyman's known at getting something out of nothing sometimes. There's a reason why guys low on the card, like, JT Smith and people like that, they're still known among ECW faithful. A guy who helped out at shows and just fooled around in the ring by the name of Mikey Whipwreck became one of their biggest stars. Go figure. Heyman is the guy for the job. And new talent, help new talent get over. One of those new talents was a guy by the name of CM Punk. Now, I've known about CM Punk for several years due to the tape trading and stuff on the indies, ROH, stuff with Samoa Joe, matches with AJ Styles, you name it. So I was psyched for him coming in when the vignettes were building him up. Now, WWE had struck a deal with the Sci-Fi Network to air ECW. The Sci-Fi Network wasn't available here in Canada at the time. However, Canadian coverage was done by the Global Network at a bad hour, which didn't draw anything. But either way, so I still try to watch it sometimes. And I will say this, hindsight being 2020, it was dumb for us to think that we were going to get ECW again. We were dumb to think that. I'm going to say that right now. We were dumb to even hope for it. I was 23 years old at the time, and I call my 23-year-old self a dumbass for even thinking that was going to happen. I know what the WWE was like at this point. I'm not one of those fans that say it was never the same since the Attitude Era. In some ways, that might be true, but in other ways, I still like to. I've mentioned this before in the podcast. I have liked many different things that the WWE has done since the Attitude Era in the last 20 years. They had some eras that were better, like some years or periods that were better than others, some that were just terrible, some that were in between. That's wrestling, though. Wrestling, if you think about it, has always been that way. Even if you go back to the territory days, listen to the Stick to Wrestling podcast with John McAdam. Check it out. Part of the Brian Last's Arcadian Vanguard Network. You look at the territories. They had up and down periods. And they talk about this, especially the reference they bring up was Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1983. They shit-canned a lot of talent such as Paul Orndorff and the Iron Sheik and whatnot in favor for guys who had no business being pushed, like Paul Ellering. And it was just not a good year overall for Georgia Championship Wrestling. But meanwhile, not long before that, Tommy Rich was setting the world on fire. He was fired up. Sorry, that was bad, but whatever, right? I always want to do that. But anyway, point is, wrestling is always, has their up and down periods, peaks and valleys. But if we ever thought they were going to come back to the numbers of the Attitude Era, that's rare. To even have that kind of success is rare in wrestling. It really is. So, really, all wrestling companies are trying to do since the beginning of time is just have success, make money. They weren't always, not every company was aiming for mainstream success. Mind you, Vince still does. Fails at it quite often, but still, whatever. At least he's trying. But he also succeeds at it quite often. Look at stuff with what's his face here, McAfee. It's creating a buzz. I'm not saying I love the guy, but I'm saying he's not bad. Again, that might be an unpopular opinion among the smart fans that might be listening to this, but McAfee's okay. I don't know. I think he's solid. I think he's solid as a performer. I think he's a natural heel. But anyway, as I veer right off track here, my point is that being a fan of WWE as long as I had at this point, I should have known we weren't going to get the ECW. But that being said, however, if Heyman was just given a little more leeway than he was given at this time, I still say things could have been better. I still say Heyman could have made this ECW work under the guise of a WWE product. I do. I think he could have made it work somehow. Why? Because he's all freaking Heyman. Yeah, sure, we can all point to his recent creative run. I'm sure we can. It didn't overly succeed, but there are reasons for that too. But he's still with the company. He still lends something to them in a way, even if it is just as an on-screen talent at this point. Him and Roman has worked out really well. Heyman, I don't think was given a fair chance here. Now again, I mentioned CM Punk. They brought him in. Now they did a show at the Hammerstein where ECW had the both one night stand pay per views, and it was a frequent ECW stop in their original days too. Now, that being said, however, this show, other than CM Punk's debut, was a disaster. The only other thing I remember about it, now Punk had a strong debut against Just Incredible. He was over with those smart Mark ECW fans. But at this point, too, this is just after RVD's suspension. Now, they also made RVD the ECW champion by default, pretty much, because he was the WWE champion. He had to drop both titles after an infamous drug charge where him and Sabu were pulled over. He dropped the WWE title on one night to Edge, and then the next night he dropped the ECW title to Big Show, which caused fans in Philly, yes, it was in Philly of all places, where they threw garbage in the ring at the fact that the Big Show is their champion. On this show, where CM Punk debuted in August, I believe, the main event was between the Big Show and Batista. Now, ECW's ratings on Sci-Fi were based on Sci-Fi, again, not near what Vince had hoped. And so they're bringing guys from SmackDown, like Batista, to face the Big Show. The fans shit on the match completely. Then there was they brought in DX for some shows, but these are just shows at regular arenas, so at least it would get a good reaction. I get it. You have to up your viewership. And with RVD gone, there was not much to write home about. They were trying to get new talents over, such as Punk, such as a guy by the name of Mike Knox, who, well, he's about as bland as you can get. They brought in Kelly, who, again, like many divas at the time, turned a lot of heads, and she did. Young, blonde bombshell, of course she's going to get attention. But she didn't really wrestle at this point. Mind you, some could argue she never really wrestled at all. I'm just kidding. But kind of. But anyway, they had some ECW originals. Again, I mentioned Sabu, I mentioned Sandman. And there was also interference from Sci-Fi themselves, the Sci-Fi Network themselves. Oh my goodness. They wanted that to be part of the, I guess, deal, so to speak, is that they have sci-fi type characters, like they wanted aliens. Maybe that's why they brought in Vampire. Like that's why they had Kevin Thorne. Shelly Martinez, I actually like Shelly Martinez in her role as Ariel. But anyway, Thorne exactly wasn't anyone want to get excited about. We might as well just brought back Gangrel. At least fans would know who he is, for one thing. And I don't see why not. Gangrel was still working in the indies at that point. He was he was in good shape still. I mean, I saw him not that long ago, and despite, he walks a little gingerly now, but I saw him at an independent show maybe a couple of years ago, and he still could go. Like, when the bell rang, he was going. Like, he was having a good match. So, telling a great story, and he was loved by the fans there. So, yeah, why not use Gangrel in that role? Actually, no, I literally just thought of that. Why not use Gangrel in that vampire role? People at least know who he is. He'd been gone a few years at that point, probably better part of 5-6 years. But still, people would know who he is. Wrestling fans' memories, all because of the internet and whatnot, were better by 2006 than they were in the early 90s. So anyway, the one infamous moment people remember is the zombie. The zombie, Sandman comes out, canes him. That was a recurring theme. Sandman would come out and cane these guys every week. Fans would usually pop for it, but actually, I will say one thing about the zombie thing. The cool part was the dust flying off the zombie every time Sandman hit him. That was cool. I'm not going to lie. That was actually a cool visual. But regardless, it seemed as though the only thing resembling ECW is the odd street fight, which, again, you get that on Raw, too. Some members of the roster from ECW guys. Again, you had, like, Nunzio and all that. One Stone is a little Guido. Tommy Dreamer, obviously. So, they were trying. Heyman was trying with what he had, but he felt he was being handcuffed according to most reports. Test was brought back as one of a top-level guy. And I can understand that, too. Test had something. I don't care what people say. Test had something going for him. It would always depend on wherever they put him. He would usually do well, for the most part. And I figure if anyone can get something out of him, it's Heyman. But no. Nothing there. Bobby Lashley. Now, here we go. Here's the big thing. Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley is a really good talent, in my opinion. He didn't really show how good he was until his jump to Impact. But at the same time, though, I don't fault his WWE run. I think he was thrust into a position he might not have been, ready for fully. That's at least what some experts say, that he wasn't ready to be in that position, still being very green at that time. At the same time, though, I don't think he was ever terrible. I just don't think he did anything overly great. At the same time, he had a look. He looked like he could kill you. So, logically, I understand why this guy's like Vince's wet dream. And no, it's not supposed to be some, homoerotic joke. I'm just saying, these are the type of guys Vince McMahon goes nuts for. It's a well-known fact. People close to him have always said so. So this is what this pay-per-view comes down to as well. Bobby Lashley was Vince McMahon's guy. CM Punk was was Paul Heyman's guy. So I get that. And apparently the clash between Heyman and the McMahons have been building for weeks at this point. Now, when the pay-per-view was announced, I'm thinking, okay, well, keep in mind, months had gone by. I wasn't overly impressed with the ECW brand. But at the same time, though, I don't think it was awful. I just thought it wasn't overly, it didn't stand out. It was basically like Velocity or Shotgun or Metal or whatever, or Heat, with more storylines. That's really, to me, all it was. Because you had some high-level talents. Now, the Big Show was a champion at this time. Big Show himself was worn out, burnt out. He gained a lot of weight. He was out of shape. And this is not me criticizing him. This is by not only his own admission, but many others, again, that were there at the time. Because Big Show would leave the company shortly after. And again, he was not in the best shape. He even admits that. But at the same time, though, I can see why they want someone who's been around for so long to be their champion. Because, again, people know the Big Show. ECW's ratings on Sci-Fi, well, not terrible. We're still staying steady somewhat. Started strong and then just fell. So this pay-per-view. Now, at this time, again, it's late 2006 here. I've been going to QB Sports now for the better part of 2 years to watch pay-per-views. It started with my old wrestling crew of Kyle, my buddy Kyle McCluskey, John Forjak, Jeff Taylor, our friend Sarah as well would come with us sometimes. Then I joined up with the group, my friend Heather, as well as her friends from Burlington and her crew. And then we kind of merged, so to speak, with my good friend Paul Cellini and his crew as well. So the ECW pay-per-view. Now, again, I was talking to Paul. Paul was like my number one wrestling buddy at this time. We talk wrestling almost every week, at least for like maybe 2 hours on the phone. I'm not a phone person that way usually. I know it's hard to believe with the way I talk, how often I talk. I'm not a phone person that way. So we never really have seen much of the ECW brand, and what little he has seen, he wasn't overly impressed. So as the show's coming, we realized a few weeks prior there's only one match announced, and that's the Extreme Elimination Chamber. Now, I like the Elimination Chamber concept. I always have. And some chamber matches have been hit or miss over the years, but that's just like anything, I guess. But I'm still looking forward to this. Because I'm thinking they've been building CM Punk for a while on TV. He hadn't lost very often. They kept him well protected, especially winning like dozens and dozens of matches over Stevie Richards. But again, knowing what WWE is like, there's still that doubt in my mind. Knowing that they'd also been building Bobby Lashley for several weeks. Now, at this point, Bobby Lashley had a decent run on SmackDown. But I still think a lot of fans did not see him as a main event guy. By the way, they reacted like he was. I think he didn't get booed. Nobody shit on him, really, from what I can recall, anyway. So, but I just think that they were, okay, this guy's cool, but is he really a main event guy? Like, that was in the back of, I think, a lot of fans' heads. That's in the back of mine. I can only speak for myself, really, more than anything. But I'm like, yeah, he's good enough, I guess. That was always what I thought. He's good enough for what he is. So, the only other match they announced was, again, guys that weren't even on the ECW roster. The Hardy Boys versus Eminem. Now, this is, I guess you could say, was somewhat of a dream match in some ways. The Hardys had been, wrestling separately for a long time. Jeff had only just come back several months prior after a run in TNA. He had returned to the company in the summer of 2006. And to a lot of fanfare, too. Like, Jeff was over like Rover the moment he stepped back to that curtain. Matt was, again, not very high in the card, but still at the same time, people knew who Matt Hardy was, and fans still loved him. So, of course, the Hardy Boys hadn't tagged up together in a very long time, so it was time for a Hardy's reunion. The timing of this was good. Eminem had been a top tag team for quite some time. They'd had a brief split, but it didn't really go anywhere. So now they were back together. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, so we have this ECW pay-per-view to a brand that's been highly disappointing so far. We've announced 2 matches. One's interesting enough, chamber match. You had the Big Show defending his title against CM Punk, RVD, Bobby Lashley, Test, and Sabu. Overall, not the worst field. And then, of course, you had this one tag team match. But again, what about the other guys in ECW you're trying to build up? Like, I mean, I might have been a big fan of Mike Knox and Kevin Thorne or whatever, but at the same time, they're there. Like, might as well make use of them if you want to try to build these guys up. Because let's face facts. There was a guy named Rocky Maivia I never thought would have gone over in a million years, but he did. So I'm only a fan. I could be wrong. These guys could find a hook that gets them over. but you won't know unless you try or build them up. Another thing about this pay-per-view, it's in Augusta, Georgia. Oh yes, when I think ECW, I think Augusta, Georgia. I'm sorry, I know it's not going to be like the original ECW, like I said before, but if you're going to do an only ECW themed pay-per-view, why in the hell would you do it in Augusta, Georgia? That being said, however, I'll eat my words here in a second about that. They reacted like ECW fans normally would in a lot of ways. I'll get to that in a second. So I asked Paul, I said, is QB's running this pay-per-view? Paul told me QB didn't even know there's a pay-per-view happening. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm watching this one in the theater, which I'd done before. No big deal. I'll say, whatever, I'll wait till Armageddon anyway. Armageddon was only a couple weeks away. And I'm thinking to myself, is anybody going to watch this with me? I really thought that. I'm like, is anyone going to watch this with me? I asked Heather, I said, I suppose you don't want to watch this, do you? She's like, no, not really. I'm like, I didn't think so. Heather and I had just gone to a pay-per-view with her boyfriend at the time. We went to see Unforgiven 06, which I'll cover on a future podcast. So at this point, 06, WWE overall has not a terrible product. Some things are good about it, some things aren't so good. But I was really enjoying what would have happened going into 07. Because that year was off to a good start until something happened. But either way, so I was a guy that kind of still like to watch pay-per-views, even if they didn't look too good on paper. I really can say this looked bad on paper because there was only 2 matches announced, and they both seemed okay. So I'm like, okay, maybe they'll have some surprises. That's the thing. I knew Heyman was known for surprises as well. Good surprises. I'm not surprises for the sake of being surprises. When Heyman delivered on a surprise, he delivered on a surprise. When those lights would go in an arena, ECW arena, like Brian Pillman would be in the ring. Stuff like that. So I'm there. I go into the theater is showing it. I go alone. I felt like such a loser going to this thing alone. There's barely anyone in the theater. I think maybe 14 people. I think I did a head count, including myself. 14 people. Thankfully, I wasn't the only one by myself either. There were 3 others by themselves. Normally, these theater crowds are lively too. Nope, not here. Anyway, the Hardys versus Eminem. Match was off to a great start. Boy, did it feel long. It was only just over 20 minutes, which isn't bad. I enjoy long matches. But it seems like they were just running out of things to do at certain points. They're trying to get to that time frame they had to make this match work. Counting entrances and whatnot, again, that's how you learn things. They go from not just bell to bell when you're timing out matches, you go from entrance to entrance to exit pretty much. Half an hour. This pretty much ate up the first half hour of the show. Right away, that's a sign. They got nothing. Now, the small crowd in the theater was into this, and it was a good match. Don't get me wrong. It was good. They'd have better ones after that. Still, it was good. And it just went, I'm thinking to myself, they got nothing on this show. I even thought for a split second, is it literally just going to be the 2 matches? But anyway, match, like I said, match was good. Spoiler, it was the best match of the night. Yeah, opening match, best match of the night. The WCW syndrome. Yeah. So anyway, they gelled well together. So that was a highlight. Next up, we had Matt Striker. That's right, one of the new talents they're trying to get over. And I thought Striker was passionate enough in his role against Balls Mahoney. Balls, of course, an ECW original, known for his unique, gruff look. and lighting tables on fire. I love Balls. I liked Balls Mahoney. I thought he was a really good character, really badass. He looked like someone that has been through many wars. Looked like just someone, a guy who could fight on the street, that would kill you in a street fight. Like Balls looked like a legitimate tough guy. One of those guys you could beat up constantly and he'll just keep on coming at you. You look at his face and that's how he looks. Anyway, Balls wins. Match that just had no flow whatsoever. I was already bored. I was ready to tap out at this point already. And the first match was actually good. But man, the tone of the show just went down the shitter quick. I could feel the show being bad. There was a guy sitting 2 rows in front of me with his girlfriend. And I can overhear them saying, I paid such and such dollars for this. Matt Striker and Balls Mahoney. And the funny thing is, the guy, who I came off as a smart fan, was wearing an old school ECW t-shirt. And if that wasn't enough, Sabu was attacked backstage by a mystery person, found unconscious, and he's out of the match. Yes, Sabu. A guy who'd been tangled up in barbed wire, had glued an open wound shut in his career, had battled neck injuries, had done some of the craziest shit you'll see, but someone attacked him backstage and he's out. I'm sorry. The fact of the matter is, if any fan, whether they're a WWE fan or an ECW fan, knows who Sabu is, I just hung my head here. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Maybe I sound like I'm overanalyzing things here, but at the same time, though, you can almost hear the groan of the live crowd when they showed Sabu down backstage. And even, again, the guy in front of me with his girlfriend saying, are you kidding me with this shit? Now, again, you can accuse us of acting like smart marks, but really at the same time, I'm just like, this is all just one giant omen of how bad things we're going to get. So next up, we had Sylvester Terkay and Elijah Burke against FBI, Little Guido and Tony Mamaluke. No Tracy Smothers, no interest in this match. I'm sorry. No, I like Guido especially. I do. Nunzio, I like him a lot actually. He's really underrated. But I don't know. I feel as if Tracy Smothers was around, he really could have added something to this, or JT Smith. Again, that stuff was great. It at least could have made this entertaining, if not going to be great match wise. They were really trying to build Terkay here. Why? Because again, he has that kind of look Vince loves. Sad thing is, that's all he had. Burke had potential. He would later show it as the Pope in TNA, but still, there was just nothing going here. I'm like, oh my goodness, where do they find these guys? I was thinking that at the time. I knew a lot of them were OVW guys. Some of them, well, at least some of them were. I was thinking, Corny, you're killing me here. So, yeah. Then we got Daivari and Tommy Dreamer. Daivari was hanging around. Khali was hanging around Daivari this time. It seemed like they'd given up on Khali. Little did I know, several months later, he'd be the champion. Anyway, this was just not fun. These were all like 7-minute matches or so. Not really telling much of a story. Not really having much flow. And I don't even blame all the talent, really. You can only do so much with what you're given. If you're not given anything to work with, then what are you supposed to do with it? So logically, I'm hanging my head here. And I actually was on my phone. I was texting Heather, and Heather texted me, "How's the show going?" I'm like, "You don't want to know." I actually read off some of the results. You know what she said? Granted, she didn't watch ECW at the time much, so maybe that's why, but I don't even know who half these guys are. Like, well, there you go. At the same time, like I said, that could be attributed to her just not watching ECW, but I even think some of these people don't even know who, like, some people who watch ECW might have forgotten who these guys are after a while. And Davari and Dreamer, both good talents. I love Dreamer. But just nothing was happening here. And just Kali doing his thing, and I don't know. Now Heyman offers Bob Holly, Hardcore Holly, Sabu's spot in the main event. Again, I'm not, and again, this is not a knock on Bob Holly. Not a knock on him at all. I'm just saying what was happening at this show. The live crowd on at the pay-per-view, because again, you can hear, obviously you hear crowd noises during backstage segments. You can literally hear them groaning more than when they found Sabu unconscious. You can hear the crowd groan at Bob Holly being in this match. I was groaning too, because again, I have nothing against Bob Holly, but at this point, I'm just over him. So then we have mixed tag team match. Mike Knox and Kelly Kelly versus Kevin Thorne and Ariel. And again, I thought at least Kelly Kelly was easy on the eyes. Shelly Martinez played the Ariel character really well. Shelly Martinez has played a lot of characters well, but this fucking sucked. By God, was this awful. Oh my God. I normally don't like to overly criticize wrestling matches, but this was bad. This was just bad. And at the very least, I thought Kevin Thorne, even with the look, had a little something to offer. Mike Knox was just a guy with a beard. Mike Knox was buried at Survivor Series just prior to this. Not okay, I'm overstating, not buried. He was super kicked really seconds into the match and pinned. And Shawn Michaels said, "Who was that? Why should we care? Why should we care about this guy now?" I didn't care about him. I didn't care about him even before that. Now I care even less. Anyway, Thorne and Ariel won. That was it. So now we're all out of matches, and it's the main event. I'm thinking, oh, please, this chamber match going to go an hour and a half? I actually really thought that. Extreme Elimination Chamber, 1 hour and a half. I'm like, okay, you know what? Fine. The opening match was good. The rest of the stuff sucked. At least this could be something. I still had hope for this main event. Why? Because I hate being a jaded fan. I'm thinking, okay, you know what? This could be CM Punk's night, or RVD could get the title back. Because the rumors of the Big Show leaving had already pretty much come to the surface on the dirt sheets at this point. Yes, dirt sheet rumors, you gotta take with a grain of salt. Yes, Uncle Dave and Wade Keller are not right about everything, but there's times where those rumors are so rampant, you know it's true. And Big Show leaving, you could see it. You could see something was missing from him. Now, I've never been the biggest Big Show fan. I don't hate him either, though. And I can honestly see, I'm like, you know what? Something's missing that he once had. And there it was. He was done. At least for the time being. Something either way, we're going to see a new champion. Heyman really wanted to build guys like CM Punk here. Build like a CM Punk RVD feud from what other rumors have said. So, match starts. Okay, you got RVD and Bob Holly. Okay. Whatever, this is going on for a while. Nothing bad, nothing offensive here. And then CM Punk comes in, and the crowd wakes up a little more. Now, the crowd thus far, despite being in Augusta, Georgia, has had that ECW snark to them in some ways. Not to the point of a Philly crowd. I'm just saying, certain things like groaning at Bob Holly being the main event. That's like PG, or maybe PG-13 ECW crowd or whatever. That's what I put it. CM Punk comes in, springboards in. Good stuff here with RVD and Punk. Really, that's when the crowd was the liveliest in this match, when RVD and Punk were going at it. So it shows that that's something that fans would want to see in the meantime. I mean, Punk being in the future, sorry. Punk being, straight edge, he was a babyface at this point. RVD being the guy who, Mr. Relaxation, Mr. Chill, Mr. 420. People knew RVD smoked weed. It was no secret. Even if Vince was oblivious to it for years. Apparently he didn't even know what the Godfather meant when he said roll a fatty for this pimp daddy. Honest to God, Vince did not know what that meant. If he did, do you think the Godfather would have made that a popular catchphrase for years? I don't think so. Even in the Attitude Era, there's certain things I think Vince would not have visited. Either way, we next have Test. Now again, they all have individual weapons here. Test had a crowbar. Punk takes a lot of abuse. It's not looking good for Punk, but I'm thinking he's going to make that comeback. He's going to make that comeback. But then RVD hits the frog splash to get rid of him. Okay. My bag of popcorn was empty at this point, but I toss it down on the floor. And the crowd in the arena that night had the same reaction. The minimal people. I should point out, too, by this point, people left. When Punk got eliminated, 3 people got up and left. It was a group of 3. They were sitting on the other side of the theater. I saw them get up and leave. They never came back. Maybe they're just being crybabies. You get to call them that, I guess, if you want, but whatever. So, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I still hope RVD will win here. I'll even be happy if Test fucking wins. Again, Lashley, I didn't hate him, but I'm just thinking, I actually like Test. Why, I don't know, but it was just something I always kind of liked about him. I don't know what it was. Maybe I just always thought that he had potential to be more than he was. That's not his fault. He was put in some good spots in his career. And I thought he shined quite often. So, RVD soon gets eliminated. I'm like, I fucking quit. And the crowd, you just got rid of the 2. Like, okay, yes, if you want to build Lashley and make him your star, fine. But at least one of RVD or Punk should have been there at or near the end. In my opinion, if you wanted to keep the crowd in this match. Like, I hate playing fantasy booker, but why not do a finish where Big Show choke slams Punk or RVD gets rid of them? Lashley comes in, saves the day, puts heat on Big Show, eliminating the babyface. And Lashley probably still gets a decent reaction, winning the match. Heyman was at ringside for this match because he'd been in Big Show's corner many times. He'd been signing with a lot of heels at this point as his on-screen character. And I know Heyman sells the annoyed, upset, hanging facepalm look very well. But I'm honestly thinking part of this is a shoot. Because he knows he's fucked. Apparently he'd been arguing with them weeks going into this show. With Vince and everybody. And it just got worse that night. So, of course, and I should mention Bob Holly's gone. So we're down to Lashley, Big Show, and Test. Now, I mentioned I like Test. But at the same time, though, I can see why people just did not care at this point. I barely cared. So I'm thinking, okay, well, the show's almost over. I might as well stick it out here. And Lashley wins the match. Eliminates Test. Has a 5-minute showdown with the Big Show, which was just kind of eh. And that was it. Lashley's the champion, which didn't surprise me, really. Okay, whatever, cool. I guess. Hey, as wrestling fans, we're not always going to get what we want. But at the very least, we should get something, even if it's the final result's not what we want. That's my point. Think about wrestling. We're not going to get the guy that we want to win is not always going to win. That's fine. That's how wrestling works. When you're a little kid watching, the heel you hate is going to win sometimes. It just gets you psyched for the payoff. And when you get older, maybe a little more jaded, the guys that you support, you want to see go over. That being said, though, no matter what age I've been, I know I'm not always going to get what I want. There's no point in whining about it because it's just not always going to happen. Not every wrestling show is not going to go 110% how we want it to go. But as long as we get something redeemable out of it, I'm fine with that. There was nothing redeemable outside the opening match about this show. Heyman, spoiler, yeah, he was gone after this. Wouldn't see him again for several years until Brock came back. So they literally gave them nothing. I mean, this show drew the lowest buy rate in the company's history, which is not a surprise. I think, the show is a good show. It probably wouldn't have drawn very well, considering how the ECW brand was kind of floundering already in some ways. They had opportunities to get talents over. It didn't. And yeah, Bobby Lashley had an okay run after this. Again, people will still remember the Battle of the Billionaires with the Orange Goblin and Vince. Lashley being, Trump's representative. People still remember that, and that's a good thing. Not a bad thing. Like I said, Lashley wasn't bad. He was just kind of eh. He hadn't been wrestling very long at this point either. And I've known wrestlers who have been doing this for many, many years. Some fantastic performers who I've had the privilege of meeting. Guys who have won championships, main evented pay-per-views I've met, who have often said they feel they weren't truly as great as they were until like maybe 10 years in. Now, that doesn't necessarily state out for everyone. Not everyone's like Shawn Michaels, who gets good real quick, but he's the exception, not the rule. Lashley was very inexperienced, but a lot of the guys he worked with helped him cover for that. I think that's why on SmackDown they put him with Finlay for so long. Because Finlay had a lot of experience under his belt. He was a really good worker, and that's the kind of guy you should put him with. And their matches hid a lot of Lashley's weaknesses. But they lost the crowd in this match. Now, some will say, like, again, that's where the apologists usually come out and say, well, they're just entitled fans. Like, well, maybe yes. Maybe some are. But at the same time, though, even watching this show back again a couple years ago, it's still shitty. Usually I can watch a shitty show like King of the Ring 95 and still find something I enjoy about it. There are shows that are such a train wreck like King of the Ring 95 or Great American Bash 91 or whatever that are such train wrecks that you still enjoy them for that reason. This just sucks. Bottom line. And that's why I did this podcast this week, because I think as a wrestling fan, there are downs too. But that being said, however, even though the show's not even good from a train wreck standpoint, looking back on it, it's actually been kind of fun. So there you go. There you have it, folks. ECW December to Dismember 2006. By the same time next year, in 2007, you look at the main event of this match. CM Punk was still there. A year later, around this time, a year later after the show, 2007, he'd be the ECW champion. Still a babyface. Still hadn't really hit a stride yet as a top guy that way, but was on his way. Bob Holly is still with the company. Later soon started something with Cody Rhodes. RVD, gone. Test, gone. Big Show, gone, although he'd be back soon after. Bobby Lashley, the guy they were trying to make their big star, gone. Even Sabu, who was originally scheduled for the match, gone. There you have it. And again, a lot of people on this show were gone after as well. The majority of the people who wrestle on this show were either gone, or about to leave, or in different roles. Like Matt Striker would later go on to have a pretty decent run as a commentator. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan. Next week, we're going to go back a little further to 2001, the night of Chris Jericho's infamous wins over two of the top guys in all of professional wrestling. I'm talking about Vengeance 2001. I'll talk about the fallout from the invasion. I'll talk about the buildup of the Undisputed Championship. I'll talk about the buildup of Triple H coming back, even though he didn't that night, spoiler. And I'll talk about a few other things, as well as, ooh, yes, oh yes. I don't want to do it too loud. Don't want to wake up the pets. Anyway, I don't want to get dogs howling in a 10-mile radius in this area. Believe me. So anyway, that does it for this week's episode. Find me on social media, BillChase33, both on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to add me to Facebook, talk some wrestling, go right ahead. I do not mind. And yeah, so that is going to do it. So until next time, this is Bill Chase, quoting my fellow native Hamiltonian, the late, great Billy Red Lyons, when I tell you, oh, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you'd like to make a contribution to the show, just raise your voices and go banana.